It's 2 o'clock, so I'll call the commission meeting Thursday, March 18, 2021 to order. Would you please stand, and I'm going to ask Commissioner Neal to lead us in the invocation and Commissioner Cook to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pray with me, please. Our Father, we just thank you for the privilege of service. We thank you for this organization that does its best each and every day to provide the residents of Glynn County good and equitable service. We pray, Father, that this commission would be good stewards of that you entrust to us. We thank you for the workers of JWSC. We thank you for our servicemen and women that serve our nation, and for our police and fire that protect our community. We just pray that you would be with us through this meeting today. May your will be done, and may we honor and glorify you in all that we do. And it's in your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I want to welcome everyone to our meeting, and we don't have any public comment period, so we'll move to the...
I thought we did.
Do you have a public?
We do. We've got Mr. Donald Elliott who would like to speak regarding SPLOST.
Okay. Welcome, Don.
My name is Donald M. Elliott. I live at 406 Indigo on St. Simons Island, Georgia. I was very disappointed that SPLOST did not pass. We had a lot of good projects on there, or at least you all did. Adding infrastructure to the underserved, I thought was the only way we're going to get that done in the county, and the Dunbar Creek renovation. I think you should consider, hello, Mayor, I think you should consider borrowing funds to accomplish the Dunbar Creek renovations and any other restore and renew projects that require immediate effort. I think that you should raise rates if necessary to cover the principal and interest of the payments on the loan. The other thing that I wanted to mention was the social media discussions on the SPLOST tended to indicate that there's not a lot of information out in the general public's area or their knowledge of what we've accomplished and where we're going with our accomplishments. And I think that you have the project list, and I think that every 6 months you ought to publish, or at least ask the newspapers, the Brunswick News and the Islander, to publish what you accomplished the last 6 months and what you intend to accomplish the next 6 months, so that there's general knowledge out there of many people, hopefully, that know what we are doing and what we are working on. So that's an encouragement I have for you. And that's all I want to talk about.
Great.
Thank you.
Appreciate your comments. And
Thank you.
Good to see you again. Next thing on the agenda is employee recognition. Mr. David Grantham. Commissioner Harvey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
This is the best part of our meetings.
That certainly is. Well, everybody, just thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to do this. Thank you all. And on behalf of the chairman and commissioners, we just like to recognize individuals who actually aspire to do even better, because I always say the best come here to joint water and sewer. So, Mr. Burrows, can you tell me a little bit about Mr. Grantham?
Yes, Mr. Grantham is our SCADA systems administrator. He works with both water and sewer. Spends more time with the sewer than the water, but works for both of them. And previously was a water operator for our water production system. So now he is dual certified so that he can make adjustments on both sides of the aisle.
That is great. It's good to hear about people, our people, as they move up, aspire to do something, do even greater things for our organization. This is one of the best organizations there is here in Glynn County, in the state of Georgia. Probably in the United States too. However, I'd like to just read what this certificate says. It says, State of Georgia hereby recognize board examiners for certification of water and wastewater treatment plant operators and laboratory analysts. Certifies that David Burke Grantham, having given satisfactory evidence of the necessary qualification as required by the laws of the state of Georgia, has been duly certified as a water and wastewater treatment plant operator and laboratory analysis. Wow, this man's doing a lot here. In the state of Georgia, in the county of Glynn, the city of Brunswick, Georgia, on this day, 18 March 2021. Again, sir, we appreciate what you do, and we want you to aspire to do even more. I'll say that your supervisors, I know they're proud of you. This board here is more than proud of you, and we'd like to tell you, continue to do great things for this organization. We do things for you, make this organization even greater.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and you can have a few words you'd like to say, sir.
Yes, sir. I'd like to say, ultimately, my supervisor is Mr. Burrows. I directly respond to Mr. Burrows, and I've been here next month will be 7 years, and I look forward to several more. Enjoy the projects we're working on, and look forward to more.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you, sir.
Go for us. Andrew, you got good people?
Yes, sir.
I said good people.
Congratulations, Mr. Grantham. We'll move to the committee updates. We had a facilities committee meeting yesterday, and at that meeting, we approved for consideration by the full commission 4 different easements and 1 infrastructure dedication. So those will be on the agenda later on. We also were presented the 2021 capital projects plan by Mr. Burrs, and the original plan was only going to have 11 projects on it. It's increased to 13 now because of the loss of, hopefully, the SPLOST funds that we did not get. And we'll be discussing that a little bit more as we get into the finance report. On the water pollution control plant report, we have good news in that each one of the plants is operating below capacity. The Academy Creek plant is at 55% of capacity, Dunbar at 73%, and Southport at 43%. If you tabulate all of that, it shows that we have a capacity in our 3 treatment plants of over 74,000 population equivalent. So we need to encourage people to come to Glynn County because we have the capacity. And all the plants are in permit, they're well operated, and we're seeing a reduction in flow during rainfall due to the improvements that we've done. On the capital projects report, we had a good picture presentation by Mr. Klein of 21 different projects that are presently underway by the Brunswick-Glynn County Joint Water and Sewer Commission. And like during the public comment period, these are some pretty good pictures that maybe the newspaper might want to look at some of these every once in a while, and maybe even publish some of them. And to give you an update on some of them, the North Mainland project, which is a 2016 SPLOST, it's been awarded. The construction will be started soon. Pump station 4003 is probably at 75% complete. That's the other SPLOST project. The FEMA project we're taking bids on that. Magnolia Water Improvements is about 70% complete. I think we've installed 2,700 meters on our meter project. And the sheet is so big, I'm trying to summarize it so we don't take all day because we got to listen to the master plan in a few minutes. But the Prince Street tank and the Dimley Road elevated tanks are being repainted. And the plans are finished on both the ARCO water and sewer extensions and the community road sewer extensions. The staff is doing a good job handling all these projects. They're fairly busy. but we need to be that way, because we want to keep our system in good shape and keep it moving ahead. That completes my report. I would like to ask Commissioner Duncan to give a report on the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Chairman. Yesterday, the Finance Committee did approve 2 items to refer to the full board for its consideration, and that was the property liability insurance renewals and surplus inventory. We had discussion on 2 significant items, actually 3. One is our draft budget, which will come up for our full consideration as a board for next month. We reviewed it, and essentially we're projecting to be flat in terms of our cost and our revenues, which is a good thing. The financial statement, the long and short of that is our costs are coming in convergence with the budget, and basically we're in the glide path to land where we had planned by year end financially. One other item we did talk about was having not had the SPLOST passed this week at the polls, then we had some discussion about how we raise funds and how do we pay back those funds, if you will. Not unlike past Commissioner Elliott had shared with us a few minutes ago, frankly, we are looking at that option of going to market to borrow money from GFA, for example, and then what impact will that be to our ratepayers to be able to finance that debt. We don't have any conclusions to offer on that. That'll come up again as a item for discussion at the next Finance Committee, and then the Finance Committee may take action to recommend to the full board as to what next steps will be. That concludes my report, Chairman.
Thank you. We'll move to the approval section. The first item is JWSC Property and Liability Insurance Renewal. Mr. McGinney.
Take my mask off where y'all can understand what I'm saying. The property and liability insurance renewed March 15th, and we found coverage contingent on approval by this board, effective March 15th. The general liability and automobile package remains with Travelers Insurance Company. It had an increase of $4,481, which is 4.7%. Excuse me, that was primarily in the automobile physical damage coverage. We added 2 relatively expensive vehicles. There was a small reduction in the automobile liability as a result of the reduction in the number of vehicles from 90 to 88 power units. The general liability premium was up about $1,400, and that's based on budget and payrolls. The cyber liability premium remained the same as last year, and the property insurance was up $34,000 from last year, which is 15.3%. And as we explained to the Finance Committee yesterday, that's pretty much in line with what we're seeing with other large coastal property accounts. We've enjoyed a relatively competitive property market from about 2010 or 11 until last year, and as a result of the storms and fires and floods that we've had over the past 3 to 4 years, the property market's entering a non-competitive cycle now where underwriters are raising their rates pretty much across the board, restricting their coverage terms. Fortunately, we didn't have any change in our terms, but we did have an increase in rates. Just as a historical background, the premium for property insurance in 2014-15 was $271,000, and it reduced to $254,000 in 15-16. So we're still well below where we were 4 or 5 years ago. Anyone have any questions?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that the Brunswick-Glynn Joint Water and Sewer Commission approve insurance renewal rates for each coverage category and insurer as listed in the attachment memo provided by staff.
And the motion is a second.
Second, sir.
Second. Any questions? Hearing none, all in favor? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Next item on the agenda is the master plan update. Angela Bryant and Laura Constantino. We've been working with this group for about 6 months now on this plan, so we're anxious to hear what they're going to present to us.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having us. I'll get our PowerPoint up. You all should have a copy of it also. Let's see. Don't slow.
Great. I'm Angela Bryan. This is Laura Constantino, for Waters, and we also have Tony Hairston with Ralph Tellis Financial, assisting with the project. We really appreciate you having us here today. As the chairman said, we've been working on this 6-7 months. It's been a really collaborative approach. This is actually the 3rd time that Laura and I have worked on JWSC's master plan. We started back with the original master plan and did the 2015 update. And I must say this is probably the most collaborative process we've had throughout the various master plans we've developed. We had monthly progress meetings. Commissioner Duncan and Chairman Turnipseed were always at those meetings, along with Andrew and LaDonna. It allowed us to vet, our thoughts and ideas, get any concerns, and really work through these major components of the master plan. So I just wanted to say that, but to get us started, we'll introduce our team. Again, I'm Angela Bryan, the project manager, and Laura is like I say, we've both been working on this for a long time. Laura's really headed up a lot of the master planning modeling for the water and sewer, done a lot of work with the GIS. She has a lot of information in her head about JWSC systems. Next name on the list is Francis Kungu. Francis has been really more in the background. He's with a company called EDT. They have very extensive master planning experience, particularly with really large municipalities. They work a lot in Atlanta and for the city of Atlanta. We really like that he's been able to help us maybe get a different approach, make the master plan document itself more efficient, easier to take in the information. And additionally, his team is also is in progress right now working on the project database that is a new feature for the master plan, which is going to be developed in Microsoft Access, is being developed, and is really going to allow JWC staff to track projects, make changes as the critical nature of projects change. So that's still in progress, as I say. Next is Charles Cobb with Chatham Engineering. Charles is an electrical engineer who has done fairly extensive work for JWSC, designed a lot of the major systems. The chairman just mentioned pump stations 4035 and 4036. Charles designed the electrical aspects of those. He's done work at the Academy Creek plant. Very well versed in JWC systems and standards, and a really great asset to our team for the inspections and assessments. And then Tony Hairston, Joe Williams isn't here today, but Tony and Joe are developing the revenue sufficiency model for the project. So once we completed development of the rehabilitation and expansion CIPs, we turn that information over to them. They develop the model, and Tony will be giving an update on that. So next, just briefly, I wanted to walk through the major goals of the master plan. These are essentially directly from the RFQ, but go pretty much by task for the master plan. The first one is the water and sewer 20-year population projections. Laura's going to go through that in detail on how those were developed, but this is for the 20-year period from 2020 to 2040, and this develops the foundation for all the water and sewer projections for the system. As I mentioned, the next is the major transmission water and sewer system condition assessments. And we had the civil and mechanical evaluation from Four Waters and the electrical from Charles Cobb. With that, we also develop a probability of failure and a consequence of failure score. The consequence of failure score is a new aspect to the master plan this time around. It was always kind of performed as a prioritization, but never explicitly. So there were scores for both, which are then used to develop the risk to the JWSC if a facility fails. Next is the rehabilitation capital improvement plan itself. This looks not only at the field inspections and deficiencies we found, but also looking at the conveyance and treatment of the systems. Laura utilized the models for the conveyance review. We looked into the several years worth of discharge monitoring reports and monthly operating reports for your sewer and water plants, assessed that data, and basically looked at what is the capacity of the system to meet the needs of the existing customer population. And then, again, the risk prioritization, which puts all the rehabilitation projects into an order of priority based on that risk number. In the past, we had actually separated the rehabilitation plans by system, not only just water and sewer, but individually within those systems for St. Simons Island, St. Simons Island, the mainland and city, and the South Mainland. This time, the rehabilitation plan is all water and all sewer with the systems intermixed. We really just wanted to give that focus on which has the greatest risk if it fails to the JWSC. Next is the expansion needs of the major transmission water and sewer systems. That again goes back to the water and sewer projections that Laura will go through, evaluating whether there's a need for any treatment, additional treatment capacity, or expansion to the conveyance systems. Next, cash flow needs, which is the revenue sufficiency model that Raftel has prepared, and Tony will go through that. And then the final item, as I mentioned, the project database, which is a new feature, which EDT is in progress of developing, and we'll be reaching out to Mr. Burrows soon to start going through that. So we just wanted to kind of take a step back and look at what all has been done since 2015, and again, we did that update, so we realized that JWSC has put a tremendous effort into upgrading your systems, and it really shows. When we went out and did the inspections, you know, we saw 2 new water plants, the Southampton plant and the Ridgewood plant coming online, just came online. We saw a lot of improved systematic maintenance, and it may not seem like a major thing, but seeing that your pumps are painted, you know, no rust, you're taking care of your investments in your infrastructure. On the sewer side, just tremendous improvements in your pump stations, and continuing to ongo with major construction projects. You've made a lot of inroads on your I&I studies, your inflow and infiltration, looking particularly on St. Simons Island and in the mainland areas. And then the water pollution control plants work that you're doing at Academy Creek and at the other facilities. So we've not experienced seeing this much change before with one of the updates. So we just wanted to acknowledge that and all the work that's been done. Just more for the public who might be here, these are of course your primary service areas, the North Mainland, South Mainland, and St. Simons Island. Each area has a water system and a sewer system. These are extensive areas, and we just want to note that the master plan does not look at each and every pump station. It does not look at each and every water line, sewer line. We've developed, going back to the first master plan, a major transmission system that really looks at the primary backbone of your systems, which we've then modeled. And this gives us a very good sense of the conveyance and any issues, because we can build in the demands for the entire system, even just into that backbone. So just wanted to note that. And then turn it over to Laura to go over the population projections.
So as Angela said, the first major goal of the master plan is to look at the population projections and understand what your system looks like today and then what it's going to look like 20 years from now. And I just kind of want to take a minute to address that in previous master plans, we've used the terms customers and persons and people kind of interchangeably. However, we understand that that can kind of be misleading. So for the purposes of this master plan, we're going to look at the projections in people, not necessarily customers. So with that said, I'd like to walk you through the development of the population projections. The first step we did was we had some dialogue with the city and the county and with the JWSC to understand the best available data that was out there for the population projections. And it was decided upon to utilize the data from the most recent city and county comprehensive plans, which had been developed after the 2015 master plan. And as we had dialogue over this, we came to the determination that the best data to use that was most representative of these comp plans was the 2018 BAT study, which is the Brunswick Area Transportation Study, which was completed by RSNH. And what this study does, it takes your whole geographical system of the county, and it broke it down into 388 different traffic analysis zones, and within each of those zones it developed a 2015 population and then a 2045 population. So from that, we were able to utilize a linear interpolation to come up with our 2020 population to understand the actual water and sewer users or people connected to the system. So it's also important to note that when we looked at this number, this was representative of people within the county, not necessarily water and sewer users or people. So we utilized the GIS data to kind of remove any of the septic users or private well users. And so as you can see in the PowerPoint, we've got the water service area projections, or the base population for the 20-year period, and it's broken down by the 3 different systems, and then additionally the sewer service areas for each of the water pollution control plant areas. And just as a takeaway, I think currently there's about 85,000 people that live in the county. And so 76% of those people are users of the water system, and 65% are users of the sewer system. So from that we developed, so we have the base population, and now we would like to look forward, what is your system going to look like in 20 years? And so again, we utilized the linear projections from the BAT study, and we were able to break those down into 5-year increments. And I realize that there's quite a bit of information, up on this slide, but I guess the biggest takeaway would be to look at that percent growth per year, which it varies slightly per system, but for your water systems, you're looking at a 0.8 to a 1.3% growth rate. And then for your sewer systems, you're looking at a 1 to a 1.6% growth rate. And so over the 20-year period, we're looking at roughly a growth of 13,000 water users or people, and an additional 15,000 sewer users or people. And again, with this, we did another analysis where we examined the septic and the well users, and we wanted to accurately reflect the uptake and infill of these areas. And so it was determined that we would do a 1% increase or uptake and infill of these water septic users and private well users. And then additionally, we put up there the numbers from the 2015 master plan. And as you can see, they're significantly different. And so with the next slide, I'd just like to kind of walk through some of the reasons and the changes in the methodology from 2015 to today. So when we prepared the 2015 master plan, there wasn't any real updated population projection data for the county. And so our best available information was we met with all the stakeholders. We met with people from FLETCs, the school board, Southeast Health System, the colleges. We met with developers, engineers, people from the JWSC. We met with various people, and with that came lots of voices and lots of opinions and kind of a varied approach to how growth should be occurring within the county. And so we compiled this data as best we could while trying to use all this available information. So it provided more of a subjective approach to growth within the county. And so with the 2020 master plan, we were able to utilize the comp plans and utilize this BAT study, which helped us provide an objective approach to how the growth was occurring in the county. And additionally, I'd like to point out the changes within the land use from between 2015 and today. Up on the screen, you've got what the county looks like today. There's been significant changes in conservation areas, specifically in northern St. Simons Island and north of Highway 99, where areas used to be zoned as PUD and now they're zoned strictly as conservation. There's been lots of changes where land use was medium density and now is dropped back to a lower density. And this is just, it all reflects the changes that came out of the comprehensive plan, the comprehensive plans that, it really roots in that the county wants to encourage development in areas with sufficient public facilities and available infrastructure. And so grow, in a smarter fashion. And one last thing on this, for the 2015 master plan, we had extended growth out to that pink line in the county, which we had worked with with Glynn County to determine how far we could go out. And for this master plan, we were able to pull it back, and that was really driven by the land use and the changes with the conservation.
What was the red all the way out to the far west? I didn't see the key for that.
Commercial.
Like the county line. Yeah, it's a commercial corridor.
Okay, I just couldn't see the key. I see the key now. Thank you.
Isn't that the Speedway? Yeah.
All right. So now we've looked at and developed our base population and our future population. We understand what our future users are going to look like. So now we need to develop the per capita rates. So this basically tells us, it allows us to project the flow rates or usage rates into the future. And so we developed a water per capita rate and a sewer per capita rate. And the goal is to understand the rate used by each person in gallons per capita day. So how much is one person using in your system, or how much sewer is one person generating within your system. And so to do this, we analyzed 3 years of data from the MORs, which were your water plant data records, and then DMR data, which is related to your sewer system. And we basically looked at that and we got it down to a daily rate and divided that by our base population, and that is how we generated the usage, the per capita rates. With this, we reviewed billing data and we removed any large commercial or industrial usage that just weren't reflective of a more domestic or residential type neighborhood that we wouldn't want to project into the future. For example, like the Benova flow, we wouldn't want to push that onto a community, or the use of a large hospital, things of that nature. So we took that out so that we could come up with just a representative number for domestic flow. And additionally, for the sewer system, we looked at more of the drier periods throughout the 3-year period, so that because everyone understands that two of the sewer systems are kind of heavily influenced by I&I, and we didn't want to project that I&I moving forward into the future. So As you can see in the table, we've got the per capita rates for each of the water and sewer systems. Typically about 100 gallons per day, per capita day is a kind of a rule of thumb. So you can see the water systems are relatively in line. St. Simons is a bit on the higher side, which could be influenced by the tourism within the St. Simons Island seas. And then if we look at the sewer rates, they're a bit on the higher side for the Academy Creek system and the Dunbar Creek system, which again just goes back to that I&I that we're seeing within the system. So with the population projections and then the per capita rates, we're able to understand what the average daily flow looks like, what's on a typical basis. But when you're designing your collection or transmission system, you typically want to hydraulically design it so that it can meet a peak condition. So a worst case scenario, everybody comes home from work, they're flushing their toilets or running, cooking dinner, things of that nature. So you want to look at your average day, but then you also want to look at other worst case conditions. So we developed a max day factor for the water system and a peak day factor for the water system additionally. The max day is calculated by dividing the overall maximum day production by the annual day. We looked at a 12-month period for this. And the range is between 1.5 and 2.35 for the 3 different water systems. And then for the peak hourly flow, industry standards typically between a 2.5 and a 4. And for us to calculate this, we took the max day factor on top of what we call a composite diurnal curve. So we're looking at the curve of the usage throughout the day. You've got your low usage during the evenings or when people are sleeping, and then it creeps up. So we want to look at that top part when people are all getting ready for work to understand what our peak condition is looking like. And so all of the max day and peak factors fell within what would be an industry standard. And then for the sewer system, for the peak factors, we utilized the Fair-Geyer equation, which is population driven. It's from the 10 state standards. And we developed this per each of the sub-basins. So that's why you see a range up there for each of the systems, where we've got a 3.616 as on the low end, and then up to a 4.36 on the higher end of a peaking factor. Let's see. And so we've developed the peak factor, and then kind of had a little change in methodology for how the peak factor was applied, and we came up with a hybrid approach where we were utilizing the sewer per capita rate for our base customers, because that's what's actually being used, and then we projected the future with the per capita of the water per capita for future growth, so that we're not projecting that I&I into our future numbers, because we know we've seen all the efforts that JWSC is making with all of the I&I work. Let's see. Okay, so we pulled together our existing and future population projections with the per capitas and the peaking factors, and we want to determine or take a look at what it's going to look like over the next 20 years. So what you see here is we'll go through each one of these for each of the 3 different service areas, and there's 2 graphs up there. The blue indicates the water system and the green is indicating the sewer system. So what you're seeing here is the city in North Mainland and the Academy Creek. And so this is over the 20-year period. That top line is what your permitted capacity currently is. And then that line at the bottom is where you're going to be over the next 20 years. So where you are now, and then what it looks like over the 20 years. And so this gives us a kind of a roadmap to understand where we are and our permanent capacities and where they need to be in the future, if there needs to be an expansion or changes within the system. And so for these 2 systems, for the water pollution control plant, we're looking at available capacity for Academy Creek of 34%, which is roughly 5.7 million gallons available right now, or through the 20-year period. And then for the water system, we're looking at available capacity of 48%. So both of those systems are in good shape. And moving to St. Simons Island, Same situation with the two different graphs. With the water plant, currently we're looking at a 52% of available capacity, and as you can see for the water pollution control plant, it's creeping up towards that permitted capacity within the 20-year period. However, these are we're utilizing the sewer per capita rate, which right now is heavily influenced with I&I. So, if we were able to, get some of the I&I under control and utilize the water per capita rate, we may be able to bring those the sewer ADF down. If you wanted to.
So what Laura's saying is that, we're starting the base population with this high 186 gallons per capita per day rate, which starts you above at 3.25 as your current flows that you're seeing at your treatment plant. We know those are heavily influenced by I&I. Even during dry periods, which are what Laura used to develop the rates, you just have high groundwater tables and you're always fighting against it. But we know you can look at the water with it starting down at 2.75. You could have a similar rate if you continue to be able to get the I&I out. So we've looked at this with every master plan, and we just don't believe that an expansion needs to be done of the Dunbar Creek treatment plant. There are components of the treatment plant that certainly need some hydraulic increased capacity, such as your UV disinfection system, but we don't believe as a whole that the plant needs to be expanded. So we just kind of wanted to drive that home, and we'll talk about it a little more with the I&I. But that, it's very concerning to look at that chart and know that you're getting very close to your permitted rates, and you're already, as the chairman said, at running about 73%. So it's something you have to keep an eye on, but we think that the better focus is to look at the I&I and to handle that as best you can. You will never get rid of all of it, rather than investing much more significant amounts to expand a plant and still have the problem with I&I, which will continue to get worse. So we just wanted to stop and make that point, because we know that is a concerning graph right there with the treatment plant. Thank you.
And the last of these graphs that we have here, this is the South Mainland and Exit 29 area. A bit of a different story here. We've got more than enough capacity currently over the 20-year period. With the available capacity for the water system is 67%, and the sewer, which is 84%, which puts you over at 1 MGD available currently. With that, I'm going to turn it back to Angela to walk through the major asset condition assessment.
Okay, so the what we call the task 3, the next goal of the master plan was to go out and do our field inspections and to evaluate your current infrastructure. For the field inspections, again, we had Charles Cobb doing the electrical evaluations. Laura and I conducted the mechanical and civil aspects of the inspections. The mentioned, we're looking at your major transmission system. Your major transmission system has 16 water production facilities, 3 wastewater plants, and 65 pump stations. So we listed up there the number that we went to, which we did go essentially to all the water plants except for the Ridgewood facility, which was under construction, and of course the 3 wastewater plants. But we only went to about half of the pump stations. We focused these on JWSC's priority critical facilities first, and then we selected some others so that we were able to kind of go back into the assessments we had done in prior updates, compare what we saw out in the field, see how things are deteriorating or how they are improving, and we could extrapolate that to the other 33 pump stations and get scores so that we could, again, get a probability of failure, consequence of failure scores, and a risk assessment for these facilities. So that's how we developed our list of facilities to go to. And then based on what we saw in the field, we developed a kind of a near-term deficiency list, something that we think needs to be handled in the 0 to 5 year window. prioritized by those risks, and then a longer-term approach looking at the following 3 5-year periods. So when you review the master plan, which we've brought the draft master plan with us, we'll get that at the end, you'll see kind of this near-term versus long-term approach, and that's just how we broke it down this time. So, again, just kind of what I just talked through, going through the goals of our inspections and the asset evaluations. We get our probability of failure score and then our consequence of failure score, and we're showing the scoring range there where the 1 is an excellent, 5 is catastrophic condition, failure is potentially imminent. And there are a few things that we were looking at on the systems for those, both from the civil mechanical and the electrical standpoint. For the consequence of failure score, JWSC has developed a matrix and categories that they evaluate to provide this consequence of failure score to the facilities. And JWSC actually provided us all those numbers for gravity sewer pipes, force mains, water mains, pump stations. The only ones that didn't have a score that we assessed were the water production facilities and then the treatment plants, which are all fairly critical, number 5, I would say. So you can get this quadrant graph up here, which will show you, there's kind of 2 ways we looked at this. One, you can look at the quadrant and see where you're mapping out based on your consequence of failure and the probability of failure. Are you in that upper right-hand category that's red? That's really where your investment should go, to those high-risk facilities. And then I'll get into a little later how we develop the score for the risk. But the categories in the consequence of failure look at the public image. They look at how many customers are affected, looks at a regulatory approach. Could you be getting fines? Could you be under consent order if a facility fails? What's the financial impact to the JWSC? And then what are the health and safety issues, not just to the public, but also to JWC staff? So all those looked at together to develop those scoring. So we just wanted to give you a visual on kind of the ends of the range. So this water production facility, I listed it up there, is the Southampton Water Production Facility. It's essentially a brand new rebuilt facility. So it's not a surprise it's a 1, but you can see the electrical equipment housed inside the building is in pristine condition. The pumps are painted, the valves are painted, everything is new. So that's our mark for a 1. On the flip side, I would note you didn't have any 5s scores in your water system, so I don't have any 5s to show you, which is good. So the worst I could show you is a 4. This on the left is at the I-95 water production facility. I think you can see maybe the arcing marks on the equipment. This equipment is in the estimation of the electrical engineer near the end of its useful life. It may be difficult to get parts. The equipment's outdated. So that would give it that poor ranking. This is the wellhead on the right side in the picture. This is at the Exit 29 Southport facility. This is not regularly in operation. This is a fire well only. Just want to make sure I point that out. But the corrosion on the flange at the well is really what we're looking at, and the condition of the wellhead. So that's what gave that a 4 score. So just wanted to go through some of the issues that we but saw at some of the facilities. Again, from the civil mechanical standpoint, we're looking corrosion on pipes and on the wells. As I mentioned, we saw at all the water production facilities, I believe, all the piping and pumps looked freshly painted, well maintained. So that was not a major issue on the water system at all. There were some facilities where the finished water meters were not operating, which of course can affect your records that you need to report to EPD. The ground storage tanks, it's not that they were in poor condition or anything, but that they may need cleaning or painting. And then 2 of your facilities have underground fuel storage tanks, which need to be removed. That's the airport and the Mallory water production facilities. There were others when we evaluated in 2015, and those have been removed. From the electrical standpoint, Charles was really looking to see, again, what's the estimated remaining life of the equipment. Is anything estimated to be, outdated, where it may be difficult to get parts? A lot of the facilities, he noted that there was not proper surge protection. Estimates that the grounding systems, just based on the age of the facilities, was beyond its useful life, had corroded. A couple facilities didn't have generator backup power. One was the Canal Road fire well, but Goldenow's one also doesn't have a generator. And then there were some lighting concerns. And the lighting concerns for the water production facilities were really related to emergency battery backup lights inside the building, so that if the power went out, crews can safely get out of the building without getting hurt. And then again, I mentioned the preventative maintenance that we saw at the facilities. So it's a little difficult to go through all of the facilities and everything that we saw, but I just wanted to give you kind of a general range of what we saw. For the city and North Mainland water system, there's 9 water production facilities, and we went to all of them. The scores on the civil and mechanical range from a 1.5 to a 3.5, so in pretty good condition. Electrical, a 1 to a 4. Several of the facilities in the kind of city area, Fletzy, Goodyear, Howard Coffin, and Canal Road, I-95, Brunswick Villas, they're just, they're facilities where the equipment is a little more outdated, and so that got his attention and got that score. For St. Simons Island, there are 4 water production facilities. They range from a 1 to a 2.5 for the civil mechanical, so pretty good condition. Again, a 1 to a 4 on the electrical. And the facilities I've listed here, those are the worst of the scores. So there are definitely better scores than this. I just wanted to point out some of what we saw. So at the airport, was a 2.5. It was really just some corrosion on the well flange, and then the buried fuel tank. And we didn't believe there was enough lighting outside on the site, that if staff were working out on the wells or something, that they could be safe.
Did you say you're going to go through kind of the scoring matrix of how these are weighted as they roll up in the?
We will, just as far as how the risk comes out, but all this information will be in, we're trying to put it in like more of a tabular format so that it's easier to take in with the master plan.
I'm just kind of curious how some of the actual weightings are. I mean, if you got a 0 and because there's no emergency lights and that's weighted the same as a major infrastructure, it's going to significantly skew your score over $100.
Right. Well, that's where the consequence of failure comes in, definitely. So we wouldn't give anything a really poor score just because of lighting, but there's not necessarily anything in this presentation that's going to show you the weighting, but we developed the probability of failure score, consequence of failure score. We multiplied them together to get that risk prioritization. So it's once those scores are developed, it pretty much was an equal weight to them. But I think it really played out the way it should, based on the critical nature of those facilities, once you see the risk prioritization scoring. And again, just like noted, the St. Simons Island water production facilities from a civil mechanical standpoint are in good shape. It's just, our electrical engineer did a very extensive evaluation, and he, developed not only what needs to be done right now, but how long is your the remaining life of your electrical system out there, and when do you need a capital replacement? So, so those scores are playing out from the electrical standpoint.
I'd like to add to what you offered there, Angela, is I spent a half a day with one of the staff looking at water and sewer facilities, and I concur with the analysis that was made by Charles Cobb and the scoring for the electrical system. Looked at that extensively, and of the ones I saw, all of those lined up with their assessment in terms of need.
Yeah, I was just trying to understand the weighting. Just understand that,
As far as what makes it one versus
I was just
two.
trying to understand whether like the MCCs, motor control centers, if that is weighted the same as lighting,
No, definitely.
or those are.
I'm not sure that, we specifically address that in the master plan, but I could try to see if Charles could provide something like that. That's an excellent point. I will make a note.
Well, basically, we're going to be taking these assessments, and this is what's going to be our future plans.
Right, yes.
The worst ones are we going to address.
Sure, I'm just going to, from
Move on, so.
compatibility.
Right.
I'm just making a number of it. One of them was the motor control center really is a 1, but lighting was a 5. You got an average score of 2.5.
Yeah.
It makes it look worse than something where
Right.
lighting and motor control center were both a 3, which would be way worse, really, but from an infrastructure perspective.
Right.
If lighting if lighting is the same weighted average, and I was just trying to understand how you weighted the average.
No, definitely not. And I think it's really for him just an experience, what he's seen. And
What Charles did, he spent most of his time looking at the motor control centers.
Right.
And the SCADA equipment. Lighting was really an ancillary remark, is that this needs to be updated because of, to improve task lighting or improve walkway lighting and the general lighting around a plant specifically. But the key focus was on the motor controls, and that's, in my view, that's the area where carried the weight for the significant scoring of need.
Right, well, that's why I was asking if it was weighted, so it sounds like it is.
It is, yes. Yes, his focus was definitely much more on the surge protection, disconnects, the age of the equipment, whether it was functional or, about to fail. But I'll see if I can get him to add something, some verbiage in there.
Angela, can I ask that you
Yes, sir.
skip a little bit on showing some of the issues and just go to the assessment summaries? That way we'll have a better feel as to what we need to be doing.
Are you looking at a particular slide?
Well, like, we don't need to show some of the problem areas, some examples,
Okay.
because we can see those later, but
Sure.
just tell us what we need to be, what the issues were.
Okay.
Move ahead.
I can do that. So this is moving into the sewer system. Just to quickly, it's a very corroded station on the left picture. And then similarly in the electrical panel, which came from hydrogen sulfide gas. So typical issues we were looking at here. For the civil and mechanical standpoint, for us, it's all about can you keep moving the water? So if you have ductile iron pipes in your wet wells and they're extremely corroded, if those go down, it's going to take some time to get the pumps up and running again. So we look at things like that, the guide rails, can they get the pumps out? Do you have bypass capability or do you have a bypass pump? We looked at the age of the pumps. JWSC keeps great records on the age of their pumps. So if anything was around 15 years old, we got it into the short-term rehab plan to look at replacing that in the near future. Electrical, very similar items as we discussed on the water side, surge protection. For the pump stations, particularly of importance is having the isolation gap so that the gases from inside the wet well don't get into the electrical panel and corrode it, like that image. And then one thing we did note was that, there's been an extensive increase in use of resilient materials, 316 stainless steel, HDP piping in your wet wells, coating all your wet wells. So you're getting an even increased life out of your equipment and your infrastructure. And I'll just briefly go through this This slide on the pump stations, we just really wanted to point out some of the major upgrades we saw from the SPLOST Phase 1. You have about 6 facilities that have been almost completely rebuilt, and these are your major stations. You have numerous projects underway right now underneath the SPLOST Phase 1 project. I've got a list of all of those. Some are already getting underway, like 4035 and 4036, and others are planned. For the Dunbar Creek system, we saw scores ranging from 1 to 4 and 2 to 5 on the electrical, but we've also seen, again, a lot of improvements on pumps, piping, valves, getting bypass pumps permanently installed, odor control at some facilities. And then exit 29, there was a major upgrade on pump station 3114 with new pumps, valves, control panel, etc. So we've seen a lot of change and a lot of improvement at the facilities, the pump station facilities and the water plants. Just briefly go through what we saw at the wastewater plants. Academy Creek is, of course, under major reconstruction right now, but we did have some recommended projects. A lot of these were aspects that maybe couldn't be funded under the current funding that you have for that project. The major one was converting the DAF building to a new control center. There was note by Charles, particularly while he was walking around the facility, and he knows this facility very well, that there are some of the electrical components that are subject to flooding. So flooding mitigation, especially considering the location of that plant, can be an important forward-looking aspect. And then Charles recommended capital replacement of the electrical services. There are 3 services that feed that plant in the 5 to 10 year window, which I know I think it's a difficult upgrade because of the layout of the system, but it is recommended. And then I just noted, I know the Academy Creek has a new permit that went into effect last July, I believe. It's got an interim period of standards, and this is laid out in the master plan too, which made some immediate changes but kept other things kind of similar to what they were. But after that 3-year period, there's going to be a very significant change in the ammonia limit. The operators mentioned that. Mark Riles mentioned it. So I think, that's probably a big part of these improvements that are being made and how they're operating. So just wanted to point that out. For exit 29, just limited improvements recommended. Facilities operate at about 30-40%, is in relatively new condition, but there is estimated need to add expansion of a module to the UV system. There's only 1 in-plant reuse pump, and there's a need to add a second one. Actually, the pump was out of service while we were there. And then 5 to 10 years down, doesn't read right, but that UV disinfection, in-plant reuse, and effluent pumps, they've had issues with lightning strikes, so there was a recommendation from the electrical engineer to build a cover over that area of the plant, which is in the picture. And then finally, the Dunbar Creek plant. There's a fairly extensive list of recommendations on projects. I think it's about 16 projects that'll be in the master plan. A lot of these look at the aeration basin for rehab, oxygen optimization out there, expanding the UV system that's been a kind of a problem area at the plant when the high flows come in, is making sure that the UV system can handle that flow. SCADA system improvements, in-plant reuse pump station, rehabilitating the digesters. That includes cleaning out the tanks themselves, improving the diffusers that get the air out, and rehabbing the tanks too. The disc filters need to be rehabbed. This is where the flow goes through before it gets to the UV disinfection. biosolids, polymers. Like I say, there's a extensive list of projects that are included, and I know this was certainly on the table to have upgrades made at this plant, so we certainly concur with that. Turn it over to Laura for I&I.
So another part of the major asset condition assessment was a analysis for the inflow and infiltration, which we briefly dived into earlier. And these help feed our rehabilitation capital improvement plans. So inflow, just a quick overview, inflow is when runoff gets into manholes or cleanouts through the surface, and then infiltration is when it gets into the system through groundwater or accident pipes or leaking joints, things of that nature. And so why this is important, it impacts loss of capacity in your system. It takes up additional conveyance within, getting to the plant. And it drives up treatment costs. You're treating, essentially rainwater. Additionally, there can be structural damage, which could lead to like road cave-ins and things of that nature. And so, for our analysis, in the past, we've wholly done just a desktop analysis or evaluation. But since the last master plan update, there has been various studies specifically on St. Simons Island. So we wanted to use that data as the best available data. So there's kind of two different methodologies. Oops, I'm sorry, I'm on the right side. Sorry about that. Two different methodologies. So for the Academy Creek and Exit 29, the desktop analysis, this is basically where we look at pump run times, and then we look at dry weather and wet weather. So is the pump, what's the pump doing during dry conditions, and what's it doing during wet conditions? And we kind of run an analysis to see if there's rainwater or inflow and infiltration getting into the system. So it helps us determine a total change in flow at the lift stations. And we developed this as a gallons per day per linear foot. And just for reference, an accepted standard is 100 gallons per inch per diameter per mile day for an 8-inch pipe. So when we went through this analysis, we divided it into 5 different categories, where negligible is you're not getting really anything into your system, and a 5 is a critical, where you're getting a significant amount into the system. And then, so the desktop analysis was for Academy Creek and Exit 29, and then for the Dunbar Creek, we analyzed a report done in 2018 where different flow monitors were placed within the system. We analyzed the flow monitoring data. And for the Academy Creek and Exit 29s, we divided up the system into different subbasins. So Academy Creek, there's 31 different subbasins we looked into. And then Exit 29, there's 6 different subbasins. And then for Dunbar Creek, there's 44 different subbasins. Some of them may be one big pump station basin with several legs of gravity sewer that come in that were different, that were flow monitored separately. And so just a kind of a high-level look at the results that we were seeing. For Academy Creek, there were 7 critical and 5 in the high range. Dunbar Creek, we saw 4 critical, 6 high, and then for the South Mainland, we didn't see any that fell into those categories. And based on these critical and high pump station basins, the results we looked at, they were expected for what we were seeing. Some of them were the larger basins that come into the plant, like the 4 WTP basin or the 2 WTP basin, which may have older materials made of concrete or clay, or heavily influenced by hydrogen sulfide within the system. So we just wanted to kind of highlight some of the things, some of the responses that JWSC has been putting out to deal with these I&I issues. So I think at the tail end of the 2015 master plan, that we was really working to develop an inflow and infiltration reduction plan. So what's our path forward, and where do we need to focus our energy? And so the 5 bullets up here are just all of the different projects and studies that have been done, part of it with the SPLOST from 2016, the 2018 St. Simon's Island abatement program, which was the flow monitoring, which then led into a more honed-in area that we went out, or the consultant went out and did smoke testing on, and then there was also additional smoke testing done on Academy Creek. And I think more recently there's a manhole rehab project on the mainland for the Academy Creek system. I believe it's 70 to 80 different manholes that will be rehabbed. Additionally, there's pump station flow monitoring installation, and JWC is the staff is continually monitoring the flow versus the rainfall for the pump stations. There's also dedicated crews that go out and do CCTV inspection work and record the condition of the infrastructure. And then, they can go out and re-inspect and look at, have a difference of what's happened in this. Wraps up I&I section.
Okay, so all of those aspects we've been talking about were used to develop the rehabilitation CIP plan. And that, of course, took the deficiencies identified and recommended improvements from what we've seen in the field. Laura updated and worked with the water and sewer models that were developed, looking at fire flows and areas of low pressure. The I&I analysis, of course, goes into the rehab plan. And then there's also some programmatic system improvements. There's quite a bit of galvanized and what's called transite water mains in the system. These can be problem materials that just need to be replaced, particularly the galvanized pipe. So a program was built into the rehabilitation plan to look at that on an annual, I believe, basis. There are 2 force mains, I believe, that are cast iron, so we have rehabilitation projects for those. And then the water meter replacement program, I know JWSC is in the midst of it right now, but we went ahead and put in starting that program kind of again in about 15 years to look at that life of the meters and capture that. So going back to the risk prioritization, it's really just the probability of failure score and your consequence of failure score. I will note that on the probability of failure scores, we had the civil, mechanical, and the electrical. We took the higher of the 2 and used that. I will get information on the weighting. But this developed a number, the product number, that really just ranked the facilities within the water rehabilitation plan and within the sewer rehabilitation plan. And it was, again, not separated by geographic system areas. It was all the projects into one ranking that we then put some estimates of time period on based on what we'd seen in the field and need from the model. So again, these are the water plants. I know it's hard to read, but again, it just kind of gives you that visual of where you get to focus. And then similarly on the pump stations, so you can see a lot are in the yellow areas, which, these aren't the most critical. It's certainly your red category. But it's just good to have a visual sometimes. So,
if I can just summarize some of what you've done there on the background, you've assessed the condition of the equipment. You've ranked it based on the importance of operational need and the consequence of failure. And from these various matrices, you've then lumped up the requirements for replacement, repair, et cetera, and that gets us, forgive me for jumping so far ahead, but that moves us quickly to, here's the first 5 years of our 20-year plan, 10, 15, and 20, et cetera, and that's defined the dollars we need to be able to generate to maintain the system as our customers would expect it to be.
Yes.
Within industry standards.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, and this presents the water rehabilitation plan, and it is broken down by types of project. I thought that would be a good aspect to view. So you've got your water treatment plants, and that includes storage, water production, transmission conveyance are your distribution mains. And then the programmatic, just like we talked about, are the water meters, the galvanized pipe, cast iron, not for this, but cast iron force main for the sewer. So there's this is the sewer rehabilitation plan, the 2020 totals at the bottom. And then at the very bottom is the 2015 comparison. So not far off from what it was in 2015.
So this is for the same 5-year period?
This is for the 20-year period.
No, I mean, like, so you got the 5-year period for 2020. Is it comparing 2020 to 2025, or is it comparing 2015 to 2020?
2015 to 2020.
So
So these were from the past master plan, the row at the bottom.
yeah, so there, I didn't know those,
But
you know.
the past master plan was for 20 years, too.
Yes, sir. What I was asking is, so you got in the top portion, you got 5-year period, that's 2020 to 2025.
Correct, yeah.
And that's $19 million.
Yes.
Below that, you got $22 million. Is that $22 million for the first 5 years of the previous master plan, which have been 15 to 20, or is that the currently aligned?
That was 2015 to 2020.
Okay.
Not currently aligned. Yes, good point.
So that $9 million at the time, I mean, that $9 million really aligns with our first $5 million of this plan.
Yes.
Right.
Assuming we had done every project
Right.
in the last
Absolutely.
master
Right.
plan. Yes.
And I will note again that Charles was very extensive in his evaluation, and so capital electrical replacements are built into all the water production facilities, and that's a big number. So I think it would be a lot less if that wasn't in there, but we thought it was important to make sure it was included. Moving on to the sewer rehabilitation plan, similar approach. It's broken down by water pollution control plans, kind of all those projects I went through. Collection and transmission system, I think that is the cast iron force mains, is that correct? Pump station improvements, and then addressing inflow and infiltration needs, which is, of course, you can see 37 million of the 76 million. So a substantial part of the money recommended toward I&I.
The I&I area is where we would get the most return in terms of long-term for our utility. Right.
Yes, they were also ranked in the same
Okay.
format with the risk prioritization.
Mhm.
So Angela went through how are we going to serve our current customer base, and I'll kind of walk through what it looks like for moving forward with over the 20-year period. So for the expansion CIP, we continued the desktop analysis and using the hydraulic models. We basically updated the existing model and then took our future flows and our future sewer generation rates and applied those to the model. And it's kind of an iterative process to kind of figure out, where your projects need to be. But it helps us understand, the impacts to the systems based on growth and where these projects need to occur. So for the sewer models, we were looking at pump station available capacities, and then for the water, we were looking at fire flow, where are the low pressure areas, where do we maybe need more storage, things of that nature. And additionally, we've added in projects where we would do a septic to sewer conversion for an entire, geographical area, and then also for bringing in private wells. So those are included in our expansion plan. So this jumps into our basically the roll-up, very similar to how we did the rehabilitation. It's broken down by different items. The water treatment plants are that first item, totaling at $12.2 million at the end of the 20-year. Transmission and conveyance, which is $7.9 million, which would be like water main extensions or water looping within the system. And then that third item there is the private wells. And again, at the bottom, you can see what the comparison was for the 20 years. Jumping into the sewer, again, similar. That first line item is the water pollution control plants. With this master plan, we had no recommendations or we did not see a need for any plant expansions. The collection and transmission is going to be your force mains or your gravity main upgrades. And the pump stations, various pump changeouts, as the flows go up, you may need an additional pump that can move that water. And then that last line item is your septic to sewer conversion projects for a total of $40 million. You can see pretty big difference from what we were looking at for the 2015, which within those numbers there were two additional, I believe. There was a Northwest Water Pollution Control Plant and some upgrades at exit 29. So that's a part of the big, the difference in the. And then with this last slide before we let Raf Tellis take over, we've got the 2015 versus the 2020. We kind of just did it's kind of a summary slide just to kind of see a snapshot of the last four that we had put together. For the rehab, water rehab, sewer rehab, and then the water expansion and the sewer expansions, where we were looking at in 2015 and where we are today.
I'd be curious, because this is a 5-year difference. I mean, we've already spent, the first 5 years of 2015. I'd be curious what that number is compared to that last number. Because that last 5 years, I mean, it's almost like this is a 25-year master plan if you take it back to the 2015. But just out of curiosity, what we spent between 15 and 20. That's less than 40 million. That makes that gap between the two master plans even greater. That's more than 40 million. It makes the gap. If you're trying to reconcile the two, maybe reconciling the two is important, but just from a benchmarking perspective.
Okay, we'll take a look at that. Also, we turned all this information and all these projects over to Raf Tellis, and they developed the revenue efficiency model to figure out how JWSC can pay for this consideration for their ratepayers. So, Tony?
So good afternoon, Tony Harrison, Raf Tellis. So a lot of projects, so how do we pay for it? I'll address that in the next 4 slides. We created a interactive financial model. It has a lot of elements to it because there's a lot of parts to your system, but it's summarized here on this dashboard. And the model itself, staff already has, and I think it's already done some, already has looked at it. We've presented this a couple of times this year, and like anything else, it changes as information is updated and so forth. But it really takes a 20-year look, this whole master plan duration. It looks at various elements such as rates, the ratepayers being primarily, but also capital fees from new growth and SPLOST. So on the next slide, I'll go through each of these elements and the major assumptions that went into the financial analysis, at least as we have it in the master plan. The model can be updated, can be tweaked, you can look at sensitivity and so forth. So you can look at any number of scenarios. And that was part of the point, is to have a tool for staff to be able to use. First and foremost, the capital costs that Angela and Laura are talking about are all in today's dollars. So one of the first things we want to do is, especially if you're just looking a couple years out, then some of the inflation will get baked into your capital planning. But looking 20 years out, we need to apply an inflation factor. So if you go back over the last, say, 5 to 10 years, based on the ENR construction cost index, those have gone up 2.75% a year. So we go ahead and apply that each year to those future capital projects. The second assumption is a significant one that was made, was the SPLOST funding used for neighborhood expansion projects. So there is SPLOST funding in here. So the premise on this was the rates aren't going to be funding SPLOST projects, or you're not issuing debt for ratepayers or anyone to fund those. So that can be reevaluated. You can look at different approaches towards that, whether it's funding it all in the time frame that's in the master plan, pushing some back, what have you. So the rate model is there to evaluate that.
And there may be reasons to do so. You know, there may be cost benefits to doing that it doesn't harm existing ratepayers is usually how you look at that. But going into this, it was SPOS funding is not used for any neighborhood expansion. And the SPOS funding in here is future SPOS funding as well, future referendums and so forth. So those would all remain to be seen. We did not assume any new loans to fund capital projects. That's not because there's not the debt funding capacity. It's just you had strong pay-as-you-go revenue that's generated from your ratepayers now and from new users. So there was no need. And that leads to the next item, which is renewal and replacement funding, R&R funding. Your budget this year is $6.8 million from ratepayers that goes back into the system to fund the renewals and replacement. So that's a very strong funding level, and it was actually, because the projects are somewhat front-loaded, more in the first 10 years dollar-wise in the second half of the 10 years, it was actually adequate over the 20 years as an annual funding rule, even with the inflation. And of course, you're going to evaluate that year to year with your budget, but looking out 20 years, that is a very strong component of keeping your system well maintained and in good repair over time as well. We do, in the model, have operating budget increases by inflation as well. And then because of that, to keep pace with inflation, is we do recognize with your existing rate structure that you would index them annually based on inflation starting the year after next. And again, because the projects are a little bit front-weighted, that index is a little higher in the front end of this model, 2.5% a year. And I'll show you a comparison. You know, right now you're at the lower end of what we compared to, so you're not changing drastically. You're just keeping pace with inflation, as other utilities would need to as well. And the tail end, the other 10 years of the model, it's actually a little bit less at 1.25% a year. There's a margin of error, of course, as you look further out, 10 to 20 years. You know, that'll get refined, but at least knows the trajectory. You do have debt that's maturing in 2035, which, you know, the model takes advantage of as well. So the results, first of all, is that you have adequate debt service coverage with those parameters and assumptions. You have an internal target of at least having a 1.70 coverage, which means after you pay your current year bills with your revenue remaining, you have 1.7 times or greater revenue remaining to pay your debt, which means you have money left over to put back in the system or to have in reserves to be there available for future uses. You do have the existing debt that matures in 2035. So you actually, when you get to the tail end of the 20 years, you see that coverage improve dramatically. It's because your debt's paid off. You assume no new debt in the system. So your debt capacity remains strong because of that. And again, there may be reasons as you evaluate this over time that you might want to look at debt. It may make sense to go ahead and leverage to take advantage of certain projects that are going to have a good payback. So it's not saying that debt is bad. We just didn't need it in here. You have adequate reserves over 270 days, and it does get stronger at the tail end of the forecast, again, because the project's a little bit front-loaded. And your rates are comparable to others in the area today, and they would expect to be in the future based on what we know today. If we look at next slide. This is various utilities, public utilities to the north and south, and some have differentials depending on their service area inside a city or outside the city and so forth. You're currently at 6168. This is at 5,000 gallons. It's kind of a typical indoor user for residential. You're not the lowest, but you're not nearly the highest, and you're at the lower end of the mid-range there. And I do know, for example, Hilton Head is looking at rate increases right now due to water supply and other issues as well. So over time, you can expect these others to increase, some at a pace at what you're looking at, others, you know, may play catch up in the next 5 to 10 years where they may jump. Okay, we don't really know that, but this is where you are today. The point being is your water and sewer rates are comparable to others, okay? and they're not expected to change for any worse compared to these others in any in the horizon, from what we can tell. So, and you have a plan moving forward to have stable rates with that R&R transfer in the projects that you have here. So I'll be happy to take any questions before I hand it over. I'll be right back here if there's any questions on that.
Thank you. Do any commissioners have any questions of either Mr. Hairston or
Angelo, though. On the water expansion improvement plan, where we got private wells and joint water sewer well conversions, is that like community wells or is that individual wells that we're seeing?
It could be both, but I think the majority of them is probably looking at the SAP type systems, the SAP water systems, community water.
But did the financial analysis assume the added volumes that those SAP type systems coming on our line, online with us would provide?
Yes.
I got a question for Mr. Harrison. You say our rates are comparable. Do you mean that we need to look at our rates moving forward for increases, or because of the whatever 2.5% you said going to come up?
Yeah, that is an annual. What you do is evaluate the rates annually, and what we recommend is you adjust them a little bit every year based on inflation, like a CPI index, so that you're able to continue to do the renewal and replacement funding. So small incremental annual, because you've got increases on your cost of doing business, you have some significant increases in capital costs that are happening today. So if you don't do that, you're going to fall behind. In 10 years, you're not going to be in good shape if you don't do small.
What about you also mentioned that our loan's going to be paid off during that period of time.
Right.
So that means, so now we're going to have a differential, right? Yes or no? When that loan is paid off.
When that loan is paid off, as we have it now, you have more revenue available because you would, if you don't have any other debt, you'd have more revenue to put back into the system at that point in about 14 years. Yeah.
Well, most times you don't do a rate cut with people. You just maintain. So evidently, it would still be up there. We just have extra money. Is that what you said telling us?
Yes. If you look at that, again, this is 15 years out. So it's we're looking at that moving forward. You would have, if everything plays out like that in that time frame, you would have additional money available to look at whether it's funding or the rate levels or anything like that. So that answers your question.
It does.
Yeah, I think each year we'll be looking at this master plan and moving forward, making a lot of the recommendations in the plan. A lot of them are rehabilitation projects, some of them are expansion projects. And at each time we're going to be evaluating the rates and determining. Obviously, there are very low interest rates available to us right now. And obviously, this report was based on having splash funds. Right now, we don't have splash funds. So we're going to have to reevaluate that. I think it's a very good report, and we appreciate the time and effort y'all put into it. Any commissioners have any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to offer a motion that we approve the plan by the board, and my motion would be that the Brunswick-Glynn Joint Water Sewer Commission approve the 2020 master plan update as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
The motion second. Any questions or comments?
I do have some comments I want to offer. I attended the meetings on the development of the plan. Each time we had a review, it felt like I was pretty close to it. Did a lot of field work with some of the staff to actually validate the condition of our facility, specifically on the electrical side, because that's sort of my briar patch coming from the utility side. A couple of highlights I want to offer for the commissioners as you consider your vote to endorse this plan. It's a way forward. What we do by endorsing this plan is we're saying to staff is we endorse a plan so that you can execute on the benefit of our customers in the community. We've identified the priorities. It's really an inordinate list of what there is to do, but it's high level enough to say that, okay, in the first 5 years, we know how much funding is going to be required. Also, we have a model at the end that Tony had shared with us that we can use to do the various scenarios, Mayor, for example, on our rate analysis. If we decide, if we don't do a rate increase 1 year to keep up with cost, what will it reflect into us the next year? What will it mean to borrow money, for example, to fund the $15 million list that we had on the failed SPLOST project? How do we pay that back? What does that mean to rates going forward? Do we choose a 10, 15, 20 year? That model is available for us to evaluate and help us make a judgment on what's going to be best for our community in that regard. So the way forward, in my view, is what it sets forward for us. The other thing that it highlights is we have a very strong system. We also do not need to make multi-million-dollar investments on additional treatment capacity. We have plenty of treatment capacity. As the chairman mentioned earlier in his committee report, our capacity now with no additional expansion means that we could serve 74,000 homes in our community. So that's a good thing that we have capacity there, which allows economic development to flourish in our community. We're not limited by treatment. The other thing is, again, this points to all of us. It gives us our guide, is what funding requirements are going to be needed to maintain our system in a way that, number one, meets compliance or regulatory expectations. Number two, meets our customers' expectations for safe drinking water and the proper treatment of the wastewater at a reasonable price. And this shows us that we're really in a sweet spot in terms of what our costs are compared to our neighbors, neighboring utilities, and the other is we have a roadmap of what needs to be done over the next 20 years and what it's going to cost us. So I'll offer that as our comments as we deliberate as to endorse this plan.
I think this is a great plan. I think it's well done. I think it's well put together. I think it's a great guide for us to have. I think it's a great tool for us to have. It's a document. It's got to be fluid in nature, but it is a document. I mean, the motion is to approve it. I don't know that approving is the right word, because I think endorsing is probably a better word, because it's kind of saying, hey, this is endorsing that we support this. By the motion being approving, I almost read that as, hey, here's $191 million, and I don't think that's what this is. So, and I don't know if we can amend the motion to, to endorse the plan instead of approve the plan, because I don't know that there's anything for here to us to approve. It's really just presented to us to say, yeah, we buy into this, we agree this is a good way forward, and maybe that's just a nomenclature thing that's really semantics, but that's just,
Commissioner Harvey?
Sir, yes, I agree, but it's a good plan. It's basically, there's an assessment of our facility, what we have, assessment of our program moving forward. It is really telling us what we need to do, how we need to continue to do the things we do, and also how to get to the next level too as well, maintain. Give us a maintenance schedule, which is not in here, but it really seems to be, it implies that we have to have a schedule so we keep ourselves abreast of what's going on. So I think it's real good. I agree with Trip too as well. It's a plan, which means it's going to continue to be updated as we go. It's fluid. So do we agree to? I would say yes. As far as approving it, it's going to change anyhow, somehow. I know.
So by voting on the motion to approve, what exactly are we approving, Charlie?
Well, you're approving the master plan is what the motion says, but if you want to endorse the plan, you're really accepting the plan.
Right. Yeah. And then that's kind of my.
And not approving it. You're accepting it.
That was kind of my concern. Is you're accepting this as a document, as a guide, as a tool for staff. By approving, I'm almost ready to approve. It's like, hey, sure, I'm voting to spend $191 million, and that's not what I'm doing.
So should we amend the motion to say we're accepting the plan?
You need a motion to amend the motion.
Okay.
I'll make that motion if y'all will allow it. I'll
Is there a motion to?
make the motion just to change the word approve to accept, essentially.
No, we gotta have a motion to amend the motion first.
That's what I'm saying. Amend the motion by changing the word.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Okay. I have a motion now to, a new motion?
I believe the motion is.
Just amended it.
You just did it.
So the
now
motion
just-
stands as I move that, I'm not doing this now, we just did it, but just to clarify, I think it says now that I move that the Brunswick-Glynn County Joint Water and Sewer Commission accept the 2020 master plan update as presented. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yep, that's what we did.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second. All in favor? Motion carries. Once again, I want to thank y'all for all your work.
Thank you. It's a pleasure working on it. It's
That
always
was-
a pleasure working with you all. We have copies of the draft master plan. We'll go get them. They still need some work on them, but we would welcome your feedback and review comments.
Thank you.
The project database is in place.
Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is the minutes from the February 18th, 2021 regular meeting.
I move to accept the minutes as submitted.
Second that, sir.
Motion is second. All in favor? Motion carries 5-0. Next item is surplus inventory. Mr. Burrows?
Yes, sir. As part of the meter changeout, we are changing the manufacturer of our meters to Neptune meters. We had been replacing meters with Metron meters, and as these are no longer needed, we'd like to declare these meters that were in the warehouse as surplus. You see there's 18 meters there of various sizes for a total value of $18,490. The request is to declare them as surplus so that we may dispose of them on GovDeals.
Do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion that the Brunswick-Glynn Joint Water and Sewer Commission approve the above list of items as surplus to be disposed of in a manner that is most beneficial to the JWSC.
Second.
Motion is second. Any questions? Hearing none, all in favor? Motion carries 5-0. Next item is the infrastructure dedication. John?
Right, Commissioners, good afternoon. This document is, or this agenda item, is fairly routine. It's regarding adoption of infrastructure and acceptance of easements. Two items in particular, both on St. Simon's Island. One on Longview Drive, it's a private right-of-way, and we have obtained endorsement of 3 parcel owners to give us easements across their property to extend water and sewer lines. That is a private right-of-way, so we do require easements to do that. And we have one customer that, in particular, is in need of water right now due to a failing well. Second item is Captain's Cove subdivision, also on St. Simon's Island, North Arrington Road. And this is upon the completion of installation of private development, water and sewer infrastructure. If that infrastructure is to be dedicated to the joint water for ownership and maintenance, the developer then does that, and that's what this document is. So it also includes 2 separate easements to connect to the existing system. This did go through facilities yesterday. There's a motion on the second page.
I have a motion.
I'll offer the motion. Move that the Brunswick-Glynn Joint Water and Sewer Commission approve the above described easements and dedication of public infrastructure for ownership, operation, and maintenance as submitted.
Second.
Motion second. Any questions?
Let me make a comment. A couple of the easements, the Longview easements, they have a blank for an unofficial witness. We'll send that back to them and get them to fill that out. Apparently they didn't get it all signed the way it needed to be.
Is it okay if we go ahead and approve it?
But that's fine to go ahead and approve it. That's the form.
Okay. We're on item 5, the infrastructure dedication. We have a motion and a second to approve those dedications. Any other questions? Hearing none, all in favor? Motion carries 7-0. The discussion section, executive director's update.
Yes, sir. I'll pass along that our asset management manager, Ella Zettler, he will be presenting at the City Works Converge Conference on the 23rd, virtual conference updating the progress we've made on our asset management program that has been noticed by our software provider, and he will be making a presentation to that at a national level. So we wanted to pass that along, and also we'll be holding a hurricane tabletop exercise solely at Joint Water and Sewer on March the 31st. You are all welcome to attend. It's at 9 in the morning till 12. If you would like to attend, please let me know by Friday the 26th, so that if enough of you are attending, we can get a notice out of a public meeting before that occurs. So again, that is March 31st at 9 o'clock. It'll be about 3 hours long, and if you would like to attend, please let me know by next Friday.
I want to, my update, I want to commend the staff for the work they did assisting the engineering firm that did the master plan. We had to give them an awful lot of information. They had to use a lot of our models too. And I want to commend the facilities committee members for sitting in on all of the meetings that we had, meeting with the people. This was a long meeting, listening to the summary. And I just hope that everybody kind of understands what we have ahead of us. And our system is in better shape than it used to be in. But we need to keep improving. And we need to keep expanding. And we don't want to take our foot off the pedal, because we're going in the right direction, and we just need to do so. And I think we have the good staff to do it, and I think we have a good commission to do it. And so I just I want to thank everybody for everything you've done getting us to this stage at this time. Any other commissioners have any comments? We don't need an executive session, so we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much.
Did we need to approve minutes, or did y'all do that?
We did that already.
We did that, yeah.